Hey all you people, Snakes in Spain here. If you've been following along my channel, you may be wondering why I've skipped a Resident Evil 6 review in favor of going straight to 4's remake, the current latest entry in the series. Well, to that question, I have two answers. A mean answer and a sincere answer. The mean answer? Sue me, I review the games I want. As for the sincere answer, I gotta admit, I'm holding off on that review for as long as I possibly can. I'm at the part of this review series where I've hit the bottom of the barrel, and I'd rather give this particular entry a review before I go dumpster diving, so to speak. You know, the sort of calm before the storm, the last good game, the last game that I actually like before I get into the ones that, ooh no, I don't see nothing about them now. Don't see nothing about them now. Well, that and remakes have been the talk of the town for a little bit now, so I thought I'd chip in an extra 2 cents to the conversation. One of the largest, most prevalent conversations surrounding gaming today. To say that remakes have become prevalent in recent years is sugarcoating it. We have reached a period of pure remake excess, where in every year since the turn of the decade, we have had multiple video game remakes come out. Hell, even in the 2 years since this one's release, we have had the Dead Space remake, Persona 3 Reload, Rebirth, the Silent Hill 2 remake, Pro Skater 3+4, etc. We even have other ones to look forward to, such as Snake Eater Delta coming out this month, the rumored Halo Combat Evolved and Silent Hill original remakes, God, and Persona 4, whatever the fuck they're gonna call it, because I refuse to believe they're calling it Revival. That is like the lamest shit ever. The game literally has this whole TV motif. Why not call it Rewind? Hell, you need Persona 3 Reload that because of the guns. What the fuck? I hope this is the placeholder and not the official title. Anywho, suffice to say, remakes have taken over the industry, and whether or not that's a good thing always leads to interesting conversations. If you're willing to consider the nuances of this topic, which sadly a lot of the people on the internet seem to not. If you're asking me, I personally have not been a very big fan of these remakes. I think they try too hard to improve preconceived issues people have with the originals, which sure leads to a technically better game, but one with half the charm and style, with a severe watering down of both the story and the gameplay on top. And Persona 3 Reload is what I consider to be the worst offender in this regard. However, that being said, I still at least try to be open-minded and judge a remake fairly and honestly. I'm not the type of guy who'd go around berating people for enjoying them, nor am I interested in debating the supposed anti-artistry behind these remakes. I'm not that pretentious, guys, I promise. Hell, I reviewed every Resident Evil remake that was made up until this point, and my most negative was towards RE3, big surprise. But that still managed to get a 6 out of me. I'd say it's more of a 5 these days, but I digress. Anyway, I say all this to segue into making the claim that Resident Evil 4's remake is actually quite good, IMO. In this sea of remakes I've been less than fond of, Resident Evil 4 2023 seems to be a rare example of a mostly faithful adaptation in my eyes. One that respects the fans of the source material, while making sure to reserve some appeal to newer fans as well. I mean, big surprise, right? Given this franchise's track record with remakes and all. Of course, that's not to say that RE4R is perfect, far from it actually. But man, after putting up with the bullshit that was a Silent Hill 2 remake and its bloated ass, it's nice to go back and play a horror remake that's, for lack of a better word, good. My main thing is that Resident Evil 4 is like the only current example of a game whose original and remade versions are both available on all modern platforms, and honestly, that's kinda fucking sad. No, Persona 3 doesn't count because that's portable, and that's not the right version. But that's probably the best we'll ever get, because the source code for Fez was written in some ancient barbarian text that not even the History Channel is ever going to want to touch. So it's likely we'll never see a re-release of it. Shame. What a world we live in. Game preservation is quickly becoming a lost cause. Shut down the emulation sites. Don't port old games. Give them shiny new remakes instead. Nobody wants to play those clunky PS2 games anyway. Anywho, enough stalling, let's talk about this goddamn game. Many have debated the necessity of this remake, given how the original essentially had no major flaws. And to be more specific, when I say no major flaws, I mostly mean all things regarding combat. A remake could have easily done things like reinterpret the story or make the game scarier, I'll get into that, but it was the combat where conversations became skeptical. I mean, what more could you possibly do with a system as perfect as RE4's? Other than completely changing it, putting work in. Well, the answer to that question comes down to one simple addition: parrying. Now, I won't lie, parry mechanics are something I've always been on the fence towards. I generally don't like the way they're implemented because it boils most encounters down to mere parry fests. But the game becomes less about telegraphing and memorizing attack patterns and more about parrying everything that comes your way, essentially killing any sense of tension or strategy in combat. Not to mention the sheer parry epidemic the industry has been facing as of late. Parries have become too prevalent when the new Doom game features them. How awful. Anywho, the reason I bring this up is that for all the games that implement a parry mechanic, RE4R manages to make it actually interesting somewhat. And what it is I find so interesting about this game's parrying mechanic is the decision making that comes with. Unlike the original RE4, knives are a finite resource in the remake, and on top of that, the knife is now used in an additional number of ways. Parries have already been mentioned, but the knives can also be used to quickly escape from an enemy's grasp, get auto-killed when certain conditions are met, or, best of all, block the Salvador's attack. They really went all in at stressing the significance of the knife, which not only allowed for fun gameplay scenarios, but it also fits Leon's character, because, this guy goes gaga over his precious knives, so it makes sense to have many of your new mechanics tied to it. This knife mechanic is also pretty intricate as well. Each action you take requires a certain amount of durability, which further stresses the importance of quick decision making. There are a lot of variables you have to consider in order to determine whether or not it's even worth expending the necessary durability. Let me run some scenarios by you. Like, say you're getting choked out by some asshole, and you have a knife available. You could, and probably would, stab his ass in the throat for a quick escape, especially if you're surrounded by other enemies. So this quick escape will grant you the perfect opportunity to create some separation. But getting back to the parry mechanic, its strongest aspect, by far, is its timing window. More specifically, the way the game reacts to the player's timing. There are multiple different reactions the game can have depending on how well the player times their parries. Somewhat early parries will simply negate damage, nothing more. A well-timed parry will stagger enemies and will allow you to do a melee follow-up. Meanwhile, a parry against a bare-fisted enemy will slice their arm off, literally dismember them. This is such a relieving addition to have, since a lot of the timing windows in these so-called parry slop fests are way too forgiving. So it's nice to have various effects relative to how close the player matches that timing window. Not to mention, the weapons you're parrying also having an effect. And when you factor in durability and general resourcefulness, it elevates the parry mechanic into something you have to engage with decisively. I can't say this parry mechanic is perfect, however, because it does wind up boiling down the combat into being too reactionary for my taste. But I'll elaborate on that later on. So the knife saw a lot of adjustments, resulting in what I think is the most unique mechanic in the remake. But aside from that and a couple of obvious QOL updates, the gameplay loop is still largely the same as it was in the original. It's still this frantic, action-packed romp, with an emphasis on melee attacks and targeting different body parts. It's so similar, and yet I still find myself going back to the original far more often. And for a little while, I struggled to articulate why that was. But I think here and now, I finally have a definitive answer. This remake reeks of modern game design tropes. A lot of them I can't say I'm very fond of. This issue is somewhat noticeable in some of the gameplay quirks they decided to bring back. Most notably, the attach case Tetris, which becomes redundant because you necessitated the use of an auto sort button, which that defeats the purpose of the whole attach case Tetris if you just have a fucking auto sort button. But yeah, this remake really struggles from adhering to the quote-unquote demands of the modern gamer, which results in something more technically strong, yeah, but far less interesting to play. For instance, the way Leon moves might be more fluid and realistic, but feels sluggish in comparison to the original's sharp and snappy movements. One of my favorite things about the original was hitting an enemy's weak point, then following that up with a melee to send them flying. However, with the remake's modernized controls, this strat just doesn't scratch that same itch. It feels more like I'm dragging Leon by the collar toward the enemy. And with how fast these enemies are now, you need to make those sharp, snappy movements, and this over-animated stumbling just becomes something you'll have to needlessly wrestle around with sometimes. Like, fuck me was the room with the two Garradors a chore to get through because the controls are so imprecise now. Shout out to the lack of iframes during certain maneuvers, by the way, such as leaping from buildings. That's totally not annoying or anything. Unlike the original, Leon can now strafe while aiming. Bit of a double-edged sword if you ask me, because on one hand, the game accommodates this change by expanding upon the aggressive and unpredictable natures of the enemies. But on the other hand, the omission of the original's positioning results in a more reaction-focused gameplay loop. I will applaud this remake for the weight of all the knife and the surprising amount of depth tied to it. But with reactionary gameplay being stressed this much, it winds up homogenizing encounters. I won't deny that RE4R can be pretty fun sometimes, really fun matter of fact. I like that whole decision making with the parrying and the knife and all that. And you can pull some pretty wild weapon switching combos that, while not exactly optimal, are damn satisfying. But to put things simply, it just doesn't scratch the same itch as the original did. This is not nostalgia talking or whatever crap you want to come up with. This is just my preferences in game design talking. Again, the parry systems are nice and well developed and all, and I appreciate the attempts at trying to distinguish it from other parry systems. But at the same time, this change necessitates players' ability to react, rather than their ability to strategize and assess things like enemy composition, among several other things that take too long to address. For some people, this tickles their fancy, and I understand why. Hell, for short bursts, I think the style of gameplay is fun too. But you see, therein lies my issue with this system. I was only having fun in short bursts. Meanwhile, the original has never gotten old, because the way it's designed means any decision can intrinsically change the way the game behaves. Perhaps if this mechanic was balanced a bit better, I'd be less harsh, but that's the other thing, it's not well balanced at all. Not on the first 3 difficulties at least. They are generous, and I mean incredibly fucking generous, with how often you'll find a knife to use. It costs dick to repair and upgrade Leon's personal knife, but it ain't like it even matters anyway, because you'll come across knives so often. So as long as you're not going all Jack the Ripper on everyone's ass, you really shouldn't have to worry about running out of knives. And if this wasn't enough, crafting has made a comeback. And it's just as unbalanced as it was before. God, why is this even here? Was the game already not generous enough with its item placements? I don't want to harp on the combat all too much, because at the end of the day, I think it's quite fun. But fuck, if this remake didn't adapt the originals into something far less interesting to play. I want to move on to the next topic, but before I do so, allow me to mention something that's kinda dubious, but worthy of a mention because I fucking hate it. The RE4 remake has what I believe to be one of the worst cliches in modern gaming. Characters making too many damn comments.
A hidden staircase? It must lead to a secret room or something.
No shit.
After playing the God of War reboots, I've kinda reached my breaking point when it comes to this sort of character comments on something I literally just saw for myself type shit. The game pulls all the stops to ensure the player is absolutely aware of literally everything, and I hate it. That's not to say I disliked every change made to the gameplay. Hell, some of these changes did feel like a naturally evolved version of what the original did. The Merchant is one of these very few improvements I can think of. His dialogue is funnier and has more variety. The trade-in mechanic is a neat little addition that helps him feel more authentic, and you actually get to do the Blue Medallion minigame more than once this time. These side quests are mostly pretty innocuous whatevers, but I will gladly take more of that Blue Medallion shit. The sound it makes when you shoot one is like a shotgun shell of dopamine to the cranium. I love it. And I like how clever the game gets in deciding where to hide them. Nice. But most importantly, the treasure economy is expanded upon in a subtle way. Now you'll receive a payout bonus for inserting different gems. More variety means more bang for your buck. This is a nice change because it further maximizes the rewards you receive for being patient, which is something the original already managed to accomplish with its treasure economy. But with all that out of the way, I can get to my last big point on this topic. A complaint that speaks to the largest ongoing issue I have with these remakes,
Just forget
which is, of course, the story.
for a second. This time, it can be different. It has to.
More specifically, how it was reinterpreted. And look, as good as many of its updates were, I cannot, in good conscience, say that I liked it overall. Both in how it pays respects to the original and how it stands on its own. I can talk about the way the remake expands upon areas that didn't need it, which came at the expense of having some of my personal favorite events get removed, and reserved for the DLC that costs extra money. Fuck you. But really, what gets me about this reconstructed narrative is the tone. And to put it simply, the tone of RE4R's narrative is inconsistent, wildly so. To me, it feels as if it's caught between a rock and a hard place. It wants to provide a more horror-centric take on the original story, while paying respects to its goofy Saturday morning cartoon vibe. And it's through this struggle and appealing to both sides where we get massive amounts of tonal inconsistency. Certain elements, such as the minecart segment and Krauser's Super Wahoo jumps, are even more outrageous than they were in the original, both of which, of course, clash heavily with the remake's overall darker tone. But a lot of this inconsistency can be attributed to Mr. Kennedy himself, a guy who will go from whining about cigarettes to backflipping over chainsaws. Any attempt to recapture that silly magic of the OG amounts to empty gestures at best, and you feel this the most with the lines of dialogue brought over from the original.
Wouldn't want to get a parking ticket.
So much for helping me.
I wouldn't mind these little nods to the original had they not clashed with the overall spookier tone. Rarely do they ever feel natural, with the most famous example being one of the most damning. We all know what line I'm referring to, the world famous bingo quote, one of the most recognized quotes in Resident Evil history that isn't Jill's sandwich. In the original, it was his suave, cheeky remark that well displays Leon's confidence. It works because of the comedic tone already present in the story. There were plenty of tongue-in-cheek dialogue prior to that line drop. Meanwhile, the remake was comparatively darker and more serious. So when this line hits following a sort of atmospheric build-up, it just feels so off. Almost as if Leon is about to peer into the camera and go, "Look guys, I said the thing." At that point, I'd rather have the line not spoken at all. You can combine elements of horror and comedy, hell, there are numerous incredible examples of this in practice, but again, consistency is key. Shit like Evil Dead 2, Brain Dead, and OG RE4 clearly knew what they wanted to be and ran with it. RE4 Remake, meanwhile, is stuck between being a continuation of what the other remakes did and being a 100% faithful adaptation, wacky humor and all. I don't know, man, it's weird. But whatever, right? Who gives a shit, right? Is what you're probably all thinking, right? So some dialogue doesn't hit the same, so what? What about actually significant things that are worse in this rendition? Oh, you mean like every friggin' antagonist? Seriously, why are all the antagonists so goddamn boring in the remake? They sapped all the dynamics Leon had with them, not to mention the ridiculous lack of screen time they all had. This is especially ass with Salazar, who, in the original, grew increasingly frustrated with his inability to stop Leon. Something that sadly wasn't replicated in the remake. Here, he's just some fucking weird guy, and that's kind of it. They try to put a sort of tragic spin on his character. Nobody likes me, they don't respect me, they don't think I'm a freak. But it just doesn't come together in a very cohesive way, I think. Sadler is a much worse offender in this regard, unfortunately. The banter between him and Leon is what made RE4's story to me. Nah man, instead of that amazing and memorable dynamic, they made him more mysterious, and I'm sorry, but this is just so lame. If I had played the remake first, then perhaps I could see the vision, but in comparison to his original counterpart, this ominous angle just doesn't work for me. His whole plan is stupid as hell, and the original was so fantastic because it took that idea and just ran with it, treated it as stupid as it actually was. Guy wants to put a parasite inside of the P-Man's offspring, send her back and watch a pandemic unfold. It's a dumb plan, and this remake is dumb for trying to turn it into this spooky, ominous thing. It's super lame and I don't care for it. Also, they shove all their banter at the very end, which is doubly lame. They also do this for Salazar's boss. Triple lame. At what point does it start to come across as cheap fan service? Either commit to being scary or commit to being goofy. And if you're gonna aim to accomplish both, please write your story more carefully, please and thank you. Don't omit iconic lines from the original under the guise of taking a different direction, then just shove said lines into one little event. Fuck. Cross is alright, though I never liked the way he says rookie. The inflection in his voice when he says it, it definitely triggers something in my brain, and I don't like it.
Long time no see, rookie.
Long time no see, rookie. Oh, that's a nice knife you got there, rookie. Oh, use your knife, rookie. Better for close encounters, rookie. Bend over, rookie. Get on your hands and knees, rookie. Rookie. I did it all for the rookie. Come on, the rookie. Come on. Where am I going with this? Oh, God. But going beyond these antagonists, the way these characters are rewritten is definitely better. The protagonists are definitely written better, reinterpreted better, I think. I'm kinda mixed on Ashley though. Initially I didn't like the complete lack of sass she had in the original, but as I completed extra playthroughs, I started to grow attached to this sidekick dynamic she has with Leon. It's cool and offers plenty of fun little moments between them, nice. But if there's one character that saw an insurmountable level of improvement, a character that even the biggest remake haters can appreciate, it would be Torres Mendez. Guy is just a full force of fucking nature in this one. What was already one of the most mysterious and imposing figures from the original had been made into an even bigger Goliath of bald terror. I did long for a potential stalker segment aside from the piss easy chase sequence, but aside from that, this dude is the only character that I feel is superior to its original counterpart. Oh yeah, Louise is there, I guess. But all joking aside, Louise Sarah is probably the single greatest thing these remakes have done with the exception of RE2R's gore physics. They turned an already show-stealing character into an unforgettable one, because not only is he entirely faithful to the character he was in the original, but more so because the remake leans further into the tragedy angle the original merely hinted at. His arc in the remake is emblematic of a running theme within the game, change. More specifically, the capacity people have for it. This theme is explored a bit through Krauser and Ada, but it's Louise where this concept shines its brightest. And what it is I enjoyed about this arc was how subtle yet simultaneously powerful it was. This is a guy who knows he's done some pretty messed up shit. Like, the remake fleshes out his backstory by making him an ex-Umbrella employee. And you know, with credentials like that, you've got some self-improvement to do. Or perhaps it's too late for you to improve. And that's exactly what I find so fascinating about Luis's arc here. It precisely narrows down that feeling someone has when they know it's probably too late for them to change. When he says he's helping Leon so he can, quote, feel better about himself, it's a great and subtle way of communicating his guilt, his uncertainty, all while keeping his suave exterior intact. In Luis's mind, the chances of him fully becoming a better person may have already escaped him. And these efforts to help Leon and Ashley escape from the monster, literal monster, he helped to create, aren't exactly acts of redemption, but rather the amends he has to make, because this is his last chance to do so. And when it's all said and done, and Luis drops that final line, we're left with that one big question. People can change, right? I gotta say, I like how open they left this question. Leon doesn't provide us with a definitive answer, and you know what? I kinda dig that. The game obviously wants us to mourn Louise, sure, but in terms of whether or not he truly became a changed man, they left that up for the player to decide. Or at least, that's my uber personal interpretation of it. But I think we all can agree that this was a fantastic conclusion to his character arc, and I especially like that, despite fully knowing Luis's fate, the remake not only manages to make his death more tragic, but a lot more. Amazing. But overall, I can't say I enjoy the remake story all too much. It has its merits for sure, and I think it adapts the source material in interesting ways here and there. But for the most part, it's a tonally confused mess that isn't even sure what it wants to be. Is it a scarier, more atmospheric take on the original, or is it a direct adaptation of the original? It's this constant tug of war between these two directions that ultimately take me out of the experience almost entirely. Save for some improvements here and there, the narrative of RE4 Remake is, to put it bluntly, just a less interesting version of the original. And what I just said about the story being a less interesting version of the original, that kind of speaks to this remake as a whole. As a whole, it really is just a less interesting version of the original. I kind of get the impression that this remake tries to quote fix or at least update the original instead of giving us a fresh new take on the title, which was something the RE2 remake absolutely excelled at. It's nice that the knife saw this sort of upgrade, but could you imagine if the rest of the game had followed suit? Any other attempts to add in anything new felt like untapped potential. Like, why bother introducing a stealth mechanic if the areas where it's actually optimal to use are so scarce? I'm not asking for something drastic, like what Bloober Team did to the Silent Hill 2 remake for instance. Stick to the original's fundamentals and principles, but with a brand new vision in mind. I don't know, man. I can't say that the Resident Evil 4 remake isn't fun to play, because it most certainly is. But all in all, the remake just feels like a facsimile of the original. It plays like the original, but it's too polished, too modernized, and it's too risk-averse. This is by no means a bad game if you're simply enjoying it in a vacuum. It's a very solid action game on its own, but as a Resident Evil 4 remake, it just plays everything too safe. And I feel as if they could have taken some risks here and there. I'm feeling a solid 7 on this Resident Evil 4 remake. See you bitches later.